All right. I'll go ahead and
Ready?
start her up if
Okay,
that's
do you want to read the
yeah. I'll go ahead and read the prompt.
awesome.
Okay, so for the 10-1 Google Hangout group discussion, the prompt is this week's lectures and readings focus on public leadership and leadership in a crisis. Please discuss ways that you believe organizations can prepare leaders at all levels to respond in a crisis. And consider in this discussion the communication issues faced by BP in the spill and the failures of crisis communication. And then, all right, so after reading this prompt and taking a look at it before, based off public leadership and leaderships in a crisis, for example, recently in the NFL for football, President Trump mentioned that all players should stand for the national anthem, and then a couple players united, and they took knees or they stretched, and the Pittsburgh Steelers locked arms together. It's not technically a crisis, but it just shows that our president, and it was off of his Twitter thing as well. Basically, there was a thing on Steph Curry, who's a professional basketball player, and each year after you win the championship, you go to the White House. It's supposed to be a tradition, but obviously because there's different outlooks, and some people do not support Trump at all, and have different outlooks. They didn't want to go to the White House. And Steph Curry, who's one of the best basketball players in the world, said he was debating on going on it, and then President Trump canceled his invite, and which was if you're thinking about it, I'm just going to cancel it. And I see that as in public leadership in a crisis. It's not technically a crisis, but it is something to look at, because that's our president of the United States, and professional players in an organization are standing against him, and having their own views, even though he's the president. So I kind of looked at it that way. And then the whole thing going on with North Korea, Trump and obviously Kim Jong-un are going back and forth saying stuff about bombing, and saying they're both crazy. So I view that as a leadership in crisis. How are you going to look at a leader when a lot's going on? And recently a lot has been going on in our society, the whole North Korea thing, and Trump being president. So that's how I kind of looked at it. But you guys can go ahead and comments or anything. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. I wouldn't have thought of that as to use, but I thought that was a good example to the news for sure. I'm a big sports fan, so it's obviously you watch any game on Sunday and everybody was supporting him.
Yeah,
I guess you would say, but I think for Trump, it's I think public leaders especially, I think they just have to stay in their lane. I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, literally.
Not get so caught up in things that really they have no control over.
Yeah, and I personally, I'm not a big fan of. I don't see why the president of the United States should have a Twitter. I get that's the age that we're in now, but you're the president of the United States, and obviously he has people that tweet stuff for him. Who knows? But the whole Twitter thing kind of I don't get that.
I think with the Twitter, it makes him more relatable. That's why people liked him and voted for him, is they didn't see him as a politician, where politicians are almost robotic. They thought of him as just a real dude. I'm not a Trump guy by any means, but I think that's the biggest way that he was able to win voters over.
Yeah, I can see that.
And say what you want. Like I said, I'm not a Trump supporter, but at least you always know know what he's thinking or what's going on in his head, because he says it.
True.
Whether I don't agree with 99.99% of the things that he says, it's just, but at least I know I know what he's saying. Usually you can kind of tell when when a CEO has to step down in crisis, or there's a political scandal. You could tell when it's kind of forced. but at least with him, like, he's speaking his mind, and I guess that's the one thing I can respect, even though I don't respect what he's saying.
I think you bring up a really good point, because I think a lot of public leaders are too focused on their image, and like you said, then everything comes across very fake, whether that be a president or a CEO. Like, they're too focused on trying to get everyone to like them that they monitor everything they say. And again, I'm not a Trump fan either, but like you said, he definitely has no boundaries, and he's not too worried about trying to get people to like him. He is who he is. And I think you're right that is why he has a Twitter, so he can be more relatable, especially with the generation we're in. Social media is such a big deal.
I think that's true. On that. Like being prepared for crisis. He doesn't really have the public leadership background. So I don't know if there was too much preparation to handle certain situations.
Yeah, you can tell he's not prepared for a public leadership role just by like watching him win, during the debate and stuff. I don't know if you guys followed that, and the way he would respond to any type of question that kind of challenged his views. He very clearly didn't know how to respond to those types of, not crises, but like those types of questions that weren't positive or what he wanted to talk about. Anything that challenged him, he all of a sudden kind of shut down or then just attacked everyone else.
Colin, I feel like you opened the big can of
What's that?
But
Sorry,
I have a follow-up question for you, Colin. It's that, how do you prepare someone of crisis communication when the leader itself started the whole thing? You know what I mean? Like, I just want to hear your 2 cents on that.
It was kind of hard to hear your question.
Yeah, you kind of cut out.
Oh, really? Hold on. I can barely hear myself.
Try again. Say something.
Hello? Can you hear me?
It's just like when you say full sentences that like the middle of your sentence cuts out. Like we hear the beginning and the end.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Damn. I don't know how to fix that.
Were you asking about how to prepare another leader when like the president himself wasn't prepared? Is that kind of what you were talking about, or that he started it? Yeah. Okay. I think he was asking what your opinion was on that, Colin.
So say that again.
I think he wanted to know how you're supposed to prepare other people in that type of situation when like the leader himself was the one who started the whole thing, right, Patrick? Yeah. Is that right? Yeah. Okay.
Okay. All right. That's a good. I mean, obviously, there's two sides of the story. So one person is going to go against Trump, and the rest are going to unite. Hear myself echoing. But yeah, I mean, at that point, when it's not a true crisis, I get what you're saying with like the whole Trump thing. But, at a time of crisis, when the leader is the one that's doing that act, obviously that's when other big people, whether it's big CEOs, they have to come out and say something. And a couple have been actually. For another sports example, a big Steve Kerr was not a fan of like the comments like Trump made and like said we all have to stand together. So I think it's up to other leaders as well, whether it's the president or not, to actually stick up for like the people in our country and still unite, even if our leader's kind of going through something or says a negative comment. That's when you have other people come in from different viewpoints and offer that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think you handle the crisis by like getting practice. Like all these politicians were mayors, governors. So once you start getting to the international like conflicts, like with North Korea or stuff like that, like you prepare for it by going through this experience. And he didn't really prepare for him because he had a completely like separate upbringing in his professional career. So that's just like my view on that.
Yeah, to kind of go off of that too, I think like you mentioned like us as leaders, as individuals, like he may be having one opinion, but for us to emerge as leaders ourselves, we actually, the book talks about taking the time to really focusing on learning and educating yourself on those things, so that when crises arise, you're not necessarily going with just what everyone else is saying, you're making your own opinion, if that makes any sense, what I just kind of babbled on about.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Sorry I haven't really chimed in a lot because I don't necessarily follow politics very much. I'm still trying to learn all the different aspects of it, and definitely didn't vote this year or last year, whatever year it was. See, I just don't even know what year we voted. So I really don't have much to say on the whole president aspect of it, but I get what Marcus was saying, that they've had a lot of practice from going to like governor and whatever those other steps were. Sorry, I really don't pay attention in government. But I think in trying to prepare a leader for crisis, you have to tell them about different situations that has happened in the past, and then try and prepare them for what might to come in different situations that they could learn from the past mistakes of others.
Yeah, I like that viewpoint.
It's something I liked from the reading to the book was about how organizations spend most of their time between crises, and you're in between crisis. The more you start to think as a leader, you start to believe like we're in great shape, and then you start kind of getting rid of preparations, and you're not spending money, or you're not training your employees to be able to handle these. So I think I was asking what we've been kind of talking about with Trump and political leaders. It's just, I think you can't get too overconfident and feeling like or a crisis isn't going to happen with something, especially in a business. And I think for organizations to help prepare their leaders, I think they have to give them those opportunities and those trainings, kind of like those examples. Like growing up, I remember doing fire drills and earthquake drills all the time in school. And like a fire never happened, an earthquake never happened, but at the end of the day, like if it ever did, like we would know what to do. And I think that's how organizations kind of, in a way, they need to handle crises. Is just like, if this kind of crisis happens, this is what you need to do to prepare for it, and kind of feel like that was something that struck out to me. It was just that the longer you're in between crises, the more overconfident you are, and that overconfidence can lead to more issues if a crisis does happen.
Yeah, kind of jumping off of that, just as an example, like we at my work have been doing a lot of active shooter trainings just because of everything that's going on. But it's been really interesting to me that when I ask my associates to state the steps of what they're supposed to do, or even actually a lot of the other leaders, what they're supposed to do in that type of situation, if it were to arise, they kind of chuckle and think that it's not going to happen to us, and they don't take it seriously. So I think what you're saying about how a lot of people think it's not going to happen to them, or if it's a longer time period in between crises, people forget how crucial it is to really know the steps and how to behave when something like that comes up.
Any last final thoughts, guys? We're cutting it close on time.
No, I have no more final thoughts.
No.
Good discussion.
Good.
Well, it's fun working with you guys.
Yeah, definitely. We'll keep in touch too about this group project. And